Hello, Blitz fans of all ages, it's me, Plumcastle here, and this is the T29. Now, much like the previous tanks in the line leading up to the E5, the T29 is known for being very strong for its tier. Now, you can see if we take a look at the armor that it has got a very strong turret. For the most part, when running against an enemy T29 running AP rounds, it's not very easy to penetrate. I mean, you do have that tiny little spot above the gun mantlet, which is honestly very seldom penetrated, and that hatch that, even though it looks pretty big, is actually not that much of a worry because you very seldomly actually get hit in it. Honestly, if you play on mobile against other mobile players, the likelihood of you getting penetrated by here is probably less than getting ammo racked. So yeah, it's a very low chance, but do keep in mind that it is technically possible to get hit there. Now, you do not have a ton of hull armor, as you can see. I mean, the upper plate, we can actually get a little bit of an angle on it, but even then, it's not the greatest, so that really makes this tank much better and more well-suited for a hold-down position with its 10 degrees of gun depression. Because you can see when we do that, the upper plate becomes a lot more impressive, I would say. Now, you do have that little area there that is a little bit weaker, but still, just making it so that there's one weak spot as opposed to the whole upper plate is definitely preferred. And of course, in a hold down position, ideally you will be hiding that lower plate. Now, unlike the T1 Heavy and the M6, which come before this tank in the E5 line, this tank isn't so great when it comes to side scraping. You can see at 15 degrees, even up to 20 degree angles, that most of the side is still red. You can see there it's pretty decent, except for that little green area in the back, which can be penetrated if someone does manage to shoot through your tracks, which isn't the greatest. And in order to get that to go away, you kind of have to angle this up at about 12-13 degrees, which then becomes a little bit less impressive, and it honestly is not the greatest. So this tank, unlike the previous tanks that I mentioned, is just not as good at side scraping. Now, before I just jump right into the other statistics of this tank, I do want to go over something that I hadn't really gone over in my previous videos, and that is both provisions and equipment. Honestly, if you aren't really running these, you can sometimes be shooting yourselves in the foot. The T29 is not bad, at least not too bad in my opinion, but it does definitely get way better when you run things like provisions and equipment, particularly the soda or cola cans, which actually give you better crew skills for your provisions. And of course, the gun laying drive and the vertical stabilizer are basically a must for getting that aim time down. But anyway, with that said, now I will be going over the base statistics of this tank and show how some of these equipments can actually help you make the tank a little bit better. So firstly, in terms of hit points, you've got a nice amount of 1,500, which is decent for a tier 7 heavy tank. Now, your view range is actually ranked at number 1 out of tier 7 heavy tanks, sitting at 250 meters, which is pretty decent. Now, the gun is, it's kind of 50-50. There are some things that I really like about the gun and some things that are a little bit iffy. First of all, the damage per minute is actually a pretty middle of the road 1,848 for AP rounds, and your penetration is actually very nice at 198, and that is of course base. Now, your damage is sitting at a middle of the road 310, and you've got a nice shell velocity of 945 on AP rounds. So in general, it's pretty good, honestly. It's fairly decent. The part where this gun becomes a little bit less great, in my opinion, are the base aim time sitting at roughly 2.6, and your dispersion sitting at about 0.4. Those values aren't the greatest. Just taking roughly 2.5 seconds is a little bit of a long time to wait for your shell to really home in, and as well, a dispersion of 0.4 isn't the greatest, especially after that long wait. Now, like I said, there are things you can do like provisions. If you do run the cola cans, those can actually help your crew skills, which can actually take your dispersion down by 0.02, taking you to 0.380, which is honestly, it makes this tank feel, or sorry, it makes the dispersion feel a lot better. And of course, if you do things like adding enhanced gun laying drive and vertical stabilizer, you can actually get your base aim time to 2.2. Those two numbers are just way more workable in my opinion, and are just way nicer when it comes to shooting the gun, and it makes it feel a little less troll. Now, its APCR rounds are also pretty interesting. Your damage per minute, again, sitting middle of the road is about 1,641, and your penetration is sitting at 245. In the 245 is, again, a very nice number. Damage is, again, middle of the road, 260, but your shell velocity is sitting at 1,181. Again, very, very good. So in general, the gun, depending on what you're running, can make the tank a little bit more interesting or a little bit more troll. Just really depends on what you're running. And again, you can choose whatever equipment or provisions you want. These are just the ones that I choose to run. Now, the last thing, or the last statistic that we will look at this here is, of course, the gun depression, which is 10 degrees, and its top speed. So it has a top speed of 35 forwards, which is actually pretty decent, and then a reverse speed of 14. Again, pretty decent for tier 7 heavy tanks. One last note, you also have 64.52 tons as your weight. Now, I would say, unlike the T1 or the M6, this tank isn't the greatest when it comes to ramming. I wouldn't really recommend doing it almost ever. Like, it's really not something you want to do, particularly when you land against tier 8s, some of them being VK100s or VK168s that are going to be able to do a lot more ram damage than you are. But anyway, those are the statistics. Now let's go over to the tank and some of its unique consumables. So this is actually one of the few tanks that I actually run only one repair kit on. I, of course, run the all-purpose repair kit, which repairs everything, be it tracks, crew, modules, whatever it may be, and, of course, adrenaline for quicker reloads, and then I also use the reactive armor. So what this consumable allows me to do is when I activate it, it actually allows me to take 20% less damage by any shot that is not an HE shot. And just to show you how important this consumable can be, you can see in this clip here, I have an AMX 1357 coming after me. You can see I enable reactive armor, and he's going in, and of course he's got 6 shells in his clip, and he does bounce one of them and then gets his last shot, leaving me on 7. Now what that means is if I had not been running that consumable, he would have certainly had me even if he still bounced one of those shells, and it really ended up letting me live a little bit longer and farm a little bit more damage before the end of the game, whereas by now I could have easily been dead. So yeah, the consumable there is very, very strong, especially when you get pushed on by a lot of enemy tanks, and it can really just make this tank a lot more durable. So now that we kind of have an idea of what the T29 is like, I would now like to show you this final Class 1 replay where this tank kind of puts it all together. So you aren't actually able to see this, but I'm not running equipment or provisions, and as well, you might be able to see there I am not running the special armor consumable. And part of the reason I showed this replay is, one, because it was fairly decent, and as well, it showed that the tank could be played properly even without all of the fancy add-ons like equipment or provisions, though those things can definitely make this tank better. So we're pushing it pretty aggressively through the middle of Hellas. We get some early shots onto the Poodle, and then there is the Nashorn over there, which I carefully aim in with an HE shell, and you can see my dispersion does work in my favor there, and we do manage to actually hit him for a nice 400 plus roll. Now I'm starting to push up into the cap, and this is really where this tank is going to be showing off what it's capable of in a hold down position, as you can see here. Now again, this is very effective against things like tier 6s, but you can see even that Tiger 1 back there, which is the same tier as me, is actually bouncing me sometimes. Now in some tier 8 games, you probably will bounce a little bit less, but this tank is not incapable of playing hold down even against tier 8s. It's still got a pretty strong turret for the most part. Now you can see we're definitely just holding off this cap area. I go ahead and pull back. I know I'm going to get shot by the Tiger, but I do have a higher alpha than him, so I decide to kind of deter him from pushing up. Now we've got that AMX over there, we've got the J Panther, and of course we also have the, I want to say TOG, but I'm pretty sure that's the premium version of the TOG. But still, we're just holding our position, making sure not to do too much. And you can see here is a perfect example of the RNG that this tank sometimes has. You can see that shot honestly should have gone where it was supposed to, but it did ever so slightly clip the ground, and the ground just ate my shot. But not to worry, because we get our second shot here. Now, there is that Tiger 1 that we have to keep an eye on, as well as the other tanks around me, but I go ahead and decide to pull out to take out this Tiger 1 after my teammate has damaged him a little bit, and then come back to focus on these last 2 remaining tanks. The J Panther, I'm not really able to get a shot at because he's just a little bit too far away, but this AMX, as you're going to see in just a second, is not going to have the greatest of times, because you can see we penetrate an HE shell on the side of his turret, which was of course really nice, another 400 roll, and then I'm going to get another shot off onto him here, killing him, and we're not even done yet. So now that we're in range, we can actually go ahead and bounce on top of this J Panther that my teammate just so happened to bounce off of, leaving us with a win and of course a very cool and snazzy class 1. Not necessarily an ace, but still just a very decent game to show what the tank can do, even if you aren't running things like equipment or the special consumable or provisions or any of those things. The tank just in general is a good tank. But anyway, that is the T29. I plan to follow this up with a T32 video at some point in the future. I'm not sure if it'll be exactly my next video. I know I still need to work on the Blitz comic rework, and as well, I do know that Tank Company is coming out tomorrow, and provided I can get my hands on it, I am hoping to do a video on that as well. But anyway, with that, I hope y'all enjoyed, and as always, have fun, good luck, and happy tanking.